Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. If you are new here, we're all about optimizing the health and performance of the ageless athlete. We have tons of different guests from the medical, nutritional, and exercise world. So if you're into that type of thing, please subscribe. In today's conversation, Scotty and I are breaking down Aerobic Capacity from Chris Hinshaw, one of the world-class coaches that coach the world-class CrossFit athletes, including Rich Froning, Matt Fraser, Tia Claire Toomey. He dropped some serious knowledge in a recent podcast with Mark Bell, the Power Project, and I want to get Scott's perspective on his training methodologies. Scott also shares with us one of his most recent testing protocols that he's using with athletes, and it is not something to be missed. You are not going to be holding your breath very long during this one. Guys, if you like today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, share with a friend, and enjoy this episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
I'm pretty good.
The year is winding down here, Scott.
Yeah, hard to believe. Just got a couple more weeks.
Yeah. Feedback from our last podcast about ferritin. I got an email from a listener. And I was amazed to see that anybody had issues with ferritin, and it plucked a chord right away with this individual because he has hemochromatosis. And I thought it was just like slightly elevated ferritin levels. No, we're talking about like 2 orders of magnitude over the reference range. Talking like 3,000.
Wow, yeah.
And he gave me a little insight as to how this originally came to be, and then obviously they came up with like treatment regimens, but there were a particular illness that it was just like a general, like a bunch of hodgepodge things, kind of like we addressed last time, where it's like, it's not going to be one symptom for every single person who has high ferritin levels. It's a catch-all. It's fatigue. It's, gut issues. It's, a multitude of things. And there were a bunch of they ran all the tests across the gambit, and then finally came across like, maybe this high ferritin thing could be causing some of the issues. But the problem is that they call it the iron elephant, because a lot of doctors saw, it's this thing. So they kind of felt around in the dark and they felt, a leg, and they're like, oh, this is a tree. And then like another doctor goes, oh, wait, there's this long skinny thing. It's a snake. And then like another one grabs onto its trunk. And it's like, oh, this is whatever. And all these ones in the dark think that they have. And it wasn't until they all came together that they realized, oh, wait, like this is the underlying cause of all these different health issues, is this ferritin thing. And, it went from like this debilitating, life-threatening illness, hemochromatosis, to something that's very manageably treated, with phlebotomy and, like you said last time, blood donation. So I think it's, we might be doing a service to the public here, Scott, that like, if this is something that, it's just such a low hanging fruit that has such a fairly simple resolution, that it's worthwhile taking a look at. And I know I got my blood work done last week, and I made sure and I double checked they had ferritin levels on on my blood work. So.
Yeah. No, I think the more awareness we can bring to it, it's I think a common one, and all the various protocols that we can do, right? You can't strength train your way out of it. You can't mobilize your way out of it. You can't aerobic capacity your way out of it. You can't do breath work out of it. You can't, change doesn't matter really how you're eating. It's still not going away unless you do something about it.
Excellent point, Scott. Really, really good point. So you mentioned in there, you can't aerobic capacity away this issue. And it's a nice segue into our topic for today, which the coach and founder of Aerobic Capacity, under a trademark name, because aerobic capacity is just kind of a term. You can't really. Anyway, so Chris Hinshaw is a endurance coach, and he has worked with some of the biggest names in CrossFit, including Rich Froning, Tia Claire Toomey, Matt Fraser. I believe his resume has like 50 something CrossFit Games winners. And obviously that includes age group / masters and obviously individual competitors as well. And, Chris, his background is in triathlon. He was a very high level triathlete in the 80s, took second place in Kona, the World Ironman Championships, which for those of you who don't know is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a marathon, 26.2 miles. So just to complete those gives you a nice badge of honor, but to come in second place, it puts you in a very elite class of endurance athletes. And story goes that, and you can see the writing on the wall very quick, that he started doing CrossFit at CrossFit Santa Cruz in about 2008 or 9. Andy Sakamoto pulled him into a class, and he was completely debilitated and dejected and heartbroken that he saw these people doing CrossFit. And he's like, there's no way I can do this. And he tucked tail and ran. And then he finally mustered up the courage and overcame his fear to do it. And obviously he didn't be competitive in CrossFit, but it was a gateway into something else for him. So, and again, if you are interested in obviously listening to this podcast, this is the Cliff Notes version. So if you don't want to listen to it, here's some of the golden nuggets. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to pose some questions to Scott here, because there's some things that perplex me and made me scratch my head. So anyway, he started coaching athletes because they wanted to get better at their endurance. He's like, well, I'm an endurance athlete. I'm sure I can help in some way. And specifically running was the first thing, but there's different modalities that the types of training can definitely, improve. So he looked at, first was, I think the biggest competitor that he started working with was Jason Khalipa. And Jason, if you guys ever saw the OG CrossFit games, he was just this bear. And this is in 2008, I want to say, Scott, at the ranch.
That was the year you won, yeah.
Correct. So it was 2008. And that's when he out of nowhere, because that's the movie Every Second Counts, where out of nowhere, Jason, it was 30 squat clean and jerks, or was it clean and jerks for time at 155?
Yeah, it was a slightly heavier grace.
Yes. And the deal was that the reason they called it Every Second Counts is because it was staggered. So the entirety of the CrossFit competition led to the last event, and your times on those events staggered the start. So you had a head start if you placed fast if you were faster in previous events. So basically it was I remember the camera being on a couple of the people that were neck and neck to going into it. And then out of nowhere, someone in the back yells time, and it's Jason Khalipa, this bear. I think he was 22 years old at the time. The legend was born. And then the next year he comes back and I think places third or something like that at the ranch in 2009. And then they brought it out into Aromas in 2010. And that was the notorious Amanda workout, 975 ring muscle ups and squat snatches with 135. And in that one, he was leading it and then blew up on the final 3 reps and ended up almost killing a cameraman by throwing a 135-pound barbell at him. And that is where the red line bear kind of was born, that Jason Khalipa just was one to spill over and completely burn out. Do you recall learning about him? And then also I think James Fitzgerald had some thoughts on that too. I don't know if you remember, Scott, about why that was happening.
Yeah. I mean, I remember all that stuff, and he was kind of the classic, more powerful, more power dominant type of CrossFit athlete. And that avatar typically struggles when it's a lot of contractions or for a sustained period of time, or if they end up hitting that wall where they've just cashed out their anaerobic reserves and they don't have the recovery capacity or the aerobic capacity, to regenerate and keep moving. And he was kind of the avatar. I don't recall. I do remember James talking about it, but I actually don't remember. I'm sure it was something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he used, during some of the assessment stuff, or maybe it was the program design module, he talked about Jason. He's like, you look at this guy and this is what he does during competitions and this is how you want to train him, et cetera. And that's just something that stuck out in my mind. Yeah. So he runs across Chris Henshaw. And he's like, okay, Jason, what's your endurance training look like? He's like, well, I suck at running. So I go to the track and I sprint 800 meters. He's like, okay, cool. And then what do you do? He goes, well, I rest a bit and then I sprint 800 meters again. He's like, okay. And then what? He goes, I don't know. I'll rest a bit and maybe do like a 400 and then maybe like a 200. He goes, okay, cool. And then what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm done. And then I'll go weightlift. He goes, that's serious? That's what you do for your endurance training? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm trying to get better at running. He goes, well, why are you doing that? He goes, because I'm slow at those events and I want to go faster. And this kind of leads into Chris's theory in terms of the theory behind CrossFit is, what is your limitation in terms of going faster? Is it your ability to produce force? Is it absolute strength, right? It's a 500-pound bar. Can you lift that 500 pounds? Okay. So that's one of the things, right? But most people in submaximal efforts, it's not the absolute strength that you lack. It's your ability to do multiple repetitions, right? So let's go back to that Amanda example, 135-pound squat snatches. So Jason's max snatch is probably 250, 260 pounds at the time. 135-pound bar really shouldn't hurt him or not be able to cycle through that. So there's some kind of rate limiting step that is preventing him from being able to do that. So when you say, okay, so what is your ability? If you took a barbell and you said, okay, let's touch and go rep for 10 reps, or excuse me, if you did 30 reps for time, how would you break that up? What would you do? Well, I'd probably do, 5 sets of 5, and I'd rest like 15 to 20 seconds. Okay, great. What are you doing during that rest? Oh, I'm standing around. Okay. So what most people do is they take their recovery and do nothing. And what Chris's theory is you want to be able to continue to do some kind of, during training you want to be doing some kind of movement so that you can continuously work the muscles, so that in the beginning, you're working fast twitch, and then you work slow twitch muscles by continuing to move. And those slow twitch muscles are going to be much more oxidative, which require you to use oxygen. So what you're doing is you're producing lactate by doing short, hard movement. And then you're decreasing the intensity of the movement so you can continue to move. And you do that for multiple repetitions. And by repetitions, I mean kind of like work, rest. That will be a rep or a set. If you want to be, I call like a bunch of those would be a set. So he gives a good example is like, Spencer Hendel was terrible at handstand pushups. So he's like, all right, what do you do for like 100 handstand pushups a time? He's like, well, I do 3 reps to train it. I do 3 reps, rest 10 seconds on the dot, 3 reps, rest 10 seconds, 3 reps, rest 10 seconds. He goes, okay, so your upper body's doing nothing. So he's like, basically you're training yourself to do only 3 reps. You need to actually be able to train your upper body or that muscle group to keep working longer and to be able to recover more quickly. So he says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do 3 reps. Then you're going to kick off the wall, take a PVC pipe. And then for 20 seconds, I want you to slowly do strict presses. Then you're going to go ahead and rest like your normal 10 seconds. And then you're going to kick back up on the wall and you're going to do another 3 reps. And you're going to do that for multiple sets. So again, and usually he does that in 5s. Another example he gave was Matt Fraser. He's like, okay, what's a movement that you're not great at? He goes, well, like the stone ground to shoulder, or like the D ball ground to shoulder, which was like 150-pound ball. He goes, well, how heavy of a ball can you do? He's like, I don't know, 300 pounds. You go, okay, so it's not absolute strength. You can do that. He goes, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 3 D balls. Then you're going to take a wall ball and you're going to do that for the remainder of the minute. And then you're going to go back and do three of those heavy 150 pounders. And you're going to do that for 5 rounds. And then to reiterate what he's talking about is you're using fast twitch, highly lactate kind of building. And then you're basically teaching your body to buffer using your aerobic system. So you're teaching your body to recover. So did I explain that kind of, Scott?
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me. Yeah. I mean, it would be, if you go to a more traditional aerobic modality, let's say you're running, right, and you're actually out, not on a track or something, it's be no different than occasionally running into a hill. The effort goes way up, but then, you don't generally stop at the top of the hill and rest for a while, and probably keep going once it flattens out or maybe turns to a downhill. And then, so it's creating a little bit of an effect like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess like that's a great point, because he's just looking at this sport as like, okay, what would a runner do, or what would a biker do? What do my workouts look like? What is my intent in doing this stuff?
Yeah. And, knowing what I know about like muscle oxygen dynamics. So light work like that. So I'm pressing a PVC pipe, or I'm throwing a 20-pound ball over my shoulder now. These would be very, very easy efforts. And those are typically oxygenating. They're actually they allow more oxygen to come back into the muscle, as opposed to just standing and doing nothing. So that does make sense.
Yeah. And again, I think, something clicked in my head. It's like, well, if your recovery is standing around doing nothing, then that's kind of what you're training your body to do to recover, is to do zero effort at all. You know what I mean? Rather than like being able to close the gap. And again, the progressive overload here would be to, like, say you were doing that D-ball, like maybe in the next workout, use a 30-pound. And then the next work, use a 40-pound recovery. So you're doing the same thing, but you're getting closer and closer. So that basically the theory would be is like you got to a point where you're just doing 5 minutes straight of D-balls. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Seems like a progression that certainly could have some value. Yeah. I can see that.
So looking at this on the surface, Scott, what do you think some of the shortcomings might be? Because there's no free lunch anywhere.
Yeah, this is true. Now, this is going to, certain limitations, this is going to work probably fairly well for. Mm-hmm. But if you have an athlete whose, primary limiting factor in their aerobic ability or energy system ability is they have a respiratory issue.
Yep.
That's probably not going to do a whole lot for them.
Yep.
So, if you're a utilization limited person, in other words, that you're not able to use the oxygen that's in the muscle, it could have some value there. I suppose you're getting more oxygen in by doing the movement, quicker recovery. And same with, delivery, it's helping. It's basically helping there. So certain avatars it will help, and others it might not.
Yeah, for sure. And it also, again, it depends on what your limiters actually are, right? So, and what's to gain, right? If you're like, oh, I can get 10% better by doing this, it's like, well, that might be a big, like, and I haven't done any of this stuff. That might be a big uptick in your performance. And also,
well,
go ahead.
Think of this. So one thing that many athletes do intuitively, and you'll see, like, okay, you're in a workout, you do a set of whatever, you have to take a rest. You'll see the vibration techniques, people shake out, right? Yeah. Now, part of what that's doing is reducing some of the resting tension in the muscle and the nervous system wise. And I'm sure that's, probably what most explain going on, but I suspect that it's also allowing much more blood flow into the muscle, because typically when you're under a set, you're doing thrusters, let's say, you're not able to get full blood flow because of, occlusion, whether it's venous or arterial occlusion. You're not getting as much, you're not able to get the blood into the muscle, which means less oxygen available. And so if you can, then when you take your break, you're getting, releasing that and flushing as much in as you can, then you're going to have a better output on your next, when you pick the bar back up or whatever on the next go.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he also addresses that in terms of lactate being like a systemic thing. So, you might accumulate lactate by doing handstand push-ups, but it's like, what's the conditioning of your legs? Because your legs are these two huge pools of potential buffering. Mm-hmm. So it's like you can condition your lower body to process lactate through your system, which potentially would reduce fatigue in your upper body because of that burning. So you could also train things like, okay, you're going to do 20 handstand push-ups, and then you're going to do legs only on the bike for 40 seconds. And then you're going to go back to because you're kind of training your lower body to buffer out your upper body. So in that case, in that workout where you're like, okay, now your arms are fatigued, you might do some marching in place or something like that just to move, because obviously that low intensity effort of your legs is nothing, but it could move the blood enough that, like you said, kind of like moves the blood to prevent some of that occlusion.
Yeah. 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 Definitely helpful for sure.
Like you can imagine, like sometimes when you do something like a big set of push-ups or something like that, your heart rate isn't maybe all that high, but you're like, I can't move my arms. I'm so pumped right now. I literally can't move my arms. And then you walk around and you do a little biking. You're like, all right, I'm starting to loosen up a bit. But my heart rate never went too high, but maybe doing the biking actually can train the aerobic system to process some lactate to allow you to perform.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had athletes we'll sometimes do strength training sets, but the rest, rather than standing around, is you hop on the assault bike or something and go just at an easy pace.
That's a great point. Not to mention that it's also a lot of bang for buck too. You know what I mean? You're getting some low endurance kind of deal there. And even for strength athletes who aren't looking to like be able to do 100 strict handstand push-ups, think about the sport that you're doing. Potentially it's, let's say it's football or soccer or something like that. Like your ability to make an intense effort is very, very important, but then it's also contingent upon, can you recover from that effort quickly? And I think that's where this becomes a lot more manageable in most people's minds, because doing monostructural work like running, where you're like, think about like fartlek work, like 20 seconds hard, 40 seconds easy. You're like, oh, I get that. But then it's like, okay, how do you do that with handstand push-ups? You can't just do like easier handstand push-ups. You literally have to like think of ways to change, like to create a similar stimulus, but be able to decrease the intensity of it. Right.
Right. Yeah. It's where you just need to have that reduced gravity room next door and just drop in there.
So there was one other thing that he talked about that I thought was very interesting, and I'll throw it at you there, Scott. So he told Matt on a swim during the games, it was a 1.5 mile run and then a 500 meter swim, then a 1.5 mile run, to go into the water fast and huffing and puffing, because when you get prone, your heart rate is going to drop naturally. So you'll be okay. So gets into the water first, goes around the buoy, and and he gets caught by a couple of people, and he wants to draft. And when you draft, this is Chris's words, when you draft off something, you're using 20% less of your energy. So you can either stay with them 20% less, or you can, if they're going 20% faster than you, you can stay with them. But he never trained that type of like speed for these really good swimmers in that thing. And he ends up redlining. And he literally stopped, bobbed up and down. And I think it was Brent Fikowski who came by. He says, yo, you okay? He's like, let's go. So like, and he literally almost drowned. And Chris says, like, I learned something there. When you're running and you redline, you stop and you rest. When you swim and you redline, you drown. So he literally said, because we just said, like during a fartlek, if you're sprinting and then you're like, okay, I can't sustain this sprint, I'm just going to slow down. You have to train how to swim slowly, right? You can swim fast. Which is why so many people, they swim fast and they're like, I don't know how to swim not fast. So I just got to learn how to just keep, no. You got to learn how to like recover while you swim, like a fast 25 meter and then a slow 25 meter and then a fast 25 meter and a slow 25 meter and continue like that. If you don't train that and you just try to swim long distances and just hold on, then when you do try to go fast, you don't know how to recover.
Yeah, and you're potentially screwed.
There you're
Yeah.
very screwed. You can't just stop like on the rower.
Yeah, exactly.
and lean over and puke into a bucket. But
Right.
anecdotally, I'm trying out some of these things and just tinkering around with it. And I think he's coming down to Miami in January, so I might jump in for their seminar. But yeah, it was a worthwhile podcast. He has some funny stories and stuff like that. And the stuff that I've tried so far is like just like push-ups, 15 explosive, like 12 explosive push-ups, and then like I overshot like the first time I did this. I was like, okay, I'll lie on my back and I'll take like 10, 15 pound dumbbells and I'll press those for the remaining time of the 40 seconds. I did 15 push-ups, lied on my back. I did about 3 reps. I was like, nope. And I dropped them. I literally just used my arms going through the range of motion.
It takes so little. Yeah. It's recovery.
Dude.
Yeah.
And I was blown up after like 3 sets of that. And I was like, damn, that's pretty cool. And for a person who's trying to like maximize the time, like their workouts in time constraints, I like chose like 4 different movements today and I was done with a workout in like 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So it was like kettlebell swings, like a 70 pound Russian for like 12, 15 reps. And then like the remaining part of the minute, I took a 25 pound kettlebell and I swung that really slow and easy and was able to kind of almost completely recover, and then bang, right back into like the heavy kettlebell swings. Then I did it with battling ropes. I did like 15 seconds of hard battling ropes and then literally just did arm circles walking around.
Yeah, brilliant.
You know what I mean? Like, and then back onto the battling ropes. And another one I did was ring rows and then like bent over arm rows, just literally bent over, my arms moving. And I felt like Popeye, man. I could not get that blood out of there. But you can see how this thing could potentially be pretty good turnover to the sport.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely something, a protocol to maybe play around with. But in terms, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, go ahead. I was say I've started playing with a different protocol this week and put a few people through it, and it's really interesting. And as far as a conditioning test, so I'll drop this one on you. It's inverse of anything you've ever done or experienced. Whoa. It's so this is here's the basic one. If anybody wants to give this a try, it's a 20 rep, 20 minute AMFAP. Instead of as many rounds as possible in 20 minutes, it's as few rounds as possible in 20 minutes. So the fewer you can do here is definitely better. And what you'll do is do an isometric lunge hold, unweighted, and you hold it on the exhale. So you exhale everything out. You hold your breath on the exhale. You stay in that lunge until you need to breathe. When you need to breathe, in 20 minutes, full nasal in, out, no mouth breathing. You get 4 breaths of recovery after you finish the lunge hold, and then you go into like a deep push-up hold on parallettes at the bottom. Exhale, hold there, same deal. When you got to breathe, come out, 4 breaths. Then you do your other leg in the lunge, 4 breaths, and then you go to your bar and you do a passive hang, again with the breath hold, 4 breaths, and then that's 1 round. And so you're doing the holds on the exhale, so you're not going to reach muscular failure. You're going to reach the need to breathe long before you have to, your muscles would tap you out of any of those. And it's really interesting. So unlike a normal workout, also the first few rounds are generally going to be by far the hardest, and it will get easier as you go.
Oh, wow. Well, is that because you're holding less?
Yeah. Well, at first, it can honestly, I've done a lot of breath work, but I have not done it necessarily mixed in with movements that much, just small doses here and there, and nothing like this where it's sustained. And so it could be almost a little bit of a panicky feeling a little bit.
Oh my, I'm panicking just thinking
at the beginning, but as your system gets used to, you get some vasodilation going on, you get better oxygenation to the muscles, you'll find your round times actually start to slow down as you go, rather than, I guess that is how it works normally too. You're round slow, but here it's a good thing. Right. So it's, very interesting. There's obviously lots of other movements that you can put in there, but that was sort of the baseline.
I love that. That's really cool.
It's something that's very easy to recover from. Your heart rate will come up, but not that much. But you're getting a ton of good adaptations to that.
Love it. So I want to hear more about this, Scott, and I want to hear the results of some of these tests. So I think maybe we'll put an earmark on that and come back to it. What do you say?
Yeah, that's one we can wrap back around to. But yeah,
I love that. I love that. So a lot of testing protocols, a lot of aerobic capacity, and maybe some golden nuggets that the listeners can kind of take home with. But I imagine this this little testing protocol here may have sparked the interest of some of the listeners. And Scott, if they want to work with you, how can they do it?
yeah, just email me, scotthagnus@gmail.com, or same on Instagram. You can DM me there.
Awesome. I'm Sean LaFloch. You can give me a flockfitness.com, Flock Fitness on all of the socials. The 6-week front rack mobility
Are we close?
a program will be launching next week. So it will be the early bird starting next week. For those on the email list, it'll last for 1 week, and then we're going to get started. And if there's any spots remaining after that, because I'm only taking 20 people for the 6-week course or 6-week program, if there's any room left for that, we'll open up to the general public. But I'm guessing that the people on the email list might take up all these spots. So if you're interested in doing this, make sure you get on the email list so you can snag one of those early bird spots. Scott, I appreciate your time, brother.
Oh, same as always.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you next
Fun
week.
as always. All right. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you like what you heard, please do us a favor. Go online, give us a 5-star review. It helps grow the podcast more than you know, and it's free to you. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.
Thank you again to Dustin for coming on to today's podcast. If you are interested in working with Dustin, you can visit him on his Instagram page, Dustin Lebel, DustinLebel, on Instagram. Shoot him a DM and you can get started there. Guys, if you like today's podcast, do us a favor, go online, give us a 5-star review. It helps grow the podcast more than you know, and it's free to you. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and we will see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.